Hey, good morning, guys. This is Pastor Jason here with you today, and today I have the privilege of sharing the devotion with you guys. And I pray that the Lord would use it to meet you and to minister to you right where you are. Obviously, we're living in a time where many things have changed so quickly, and we've all had to make adjustments. And even for you guys, schooling looks very different from how it looked when this year began, and quite honestly, things have turned in a way that have been very unexpected for all of us, including your parents. As you think about that, you probably have seen some changes to their daily routine, their schedules, and things like that, or maybe even job situations that everyone has had to make adjustments to, because things have changed so quickly. And so for you guys, you may be wondering, well, what can I do in my age and my situation and your own adjustments to life right now? You might be asking yourself that question, what can I do? And so I just want to encourage you with something today, from the Bible. It's actually from 1 Samuel chapter 2. And you can always hopefully maybe pause this video and get your Bible and open up to 1 Samuel chapter 2. Where I want to focus is on verses number 4 and 5. And so I'm just going to read those verses for you. And in verse number 4, it says, "The bows of the warrior are broken, but those who stumbled are armed with strength." And verse 5 says, "Those who were full hire themselves out for food, but those who were hungry are hungry no more. She who is barren has borne 7 children, but she who has had many sons pines away." And so the basis of what's being said in those couple of verses there are how things in life can change very, very abruptly. And that is not unlike, what we're dealing with in our world here today. What is being said there in the book of Samuel is essentially just that things can change very quickly. Whereas what was being said there is that, the one who is really mighty in his own strength all of a sudden finds himself very weak and very feeble. And then it gave the example of a woman who was not able to bear children, all of a sudden has borne 7 children. The things change very quickly. And that is not unlike what's going on in this particular section of 1 Samuel. This is the story of a woman named Hannah, who for many years was not able to have children. And that was something that was very heartbreaking to her, in such a way that she didn't even receive a lot of support, honestly, from her husband in regards to just how heavy this was in her life. So she prayed for many years to be able to have children. And when the timing was right from God, he not only heard her prayer, but gave her the ability to give birth to a child whose name was Samuel. And in the perfect timing of God, he was accomplishing his perfect will, not only in the life of Hannah, but for the benefit of the people of Israel, in particular in this part of history. And so if you backed up into chapter 1, and just the last couple of verses that are in chapter 1, it gives an even greater context of what we're talking about, of how things can change very quickly. So for Hannah, in particular, the sudden change in her life was all of a sudden being able to have children where she couldn't for many years. So in verse number 27 of chapter 1, it says, this is Hannah talking, it says, "I prayed for this child, and the Lord has granted me what I have asked of him. And so now I give him to the Lord. For his whole life he will be given over to the Lord." And it says, and he, the prophet, worshiped the Lord there. And so again, this is Hannah giving the picture that even in her own life, things change very suddenly. Where she was unable to bear children, now she can. And then into chapter number 2, now at verse number 1, what we see here is a great example from Hannah's life on how we can adjust to sudden life changes, much like what we're going through today in the times that we are living in. So in chapter number 2, verse 1, it says, "Then Hannah prayed and said, 'My heart rejoices in the Lord. In the Lord my horn is lifted high. My mouth boasts over my enemies, for I delight in your deliverance. There is no one holy like the Lord. there is no one beside you. There is no rock like our God. In verse number 3, it says, do not keep talking so proudly, or let your mouth speak such arrogance. For the Lord is a God who knows, and by him deeds are weighed. And then in verses 4 and 5, which we read, it says, the bows of the warrior are broken, but those who stumbled are armed with strength. Those who were full hire themselves out for food, but those who were hungry are hungry no more. She who was barren has borne 7 children, but she who has had many sons pines away. And so, as I had mentioned towards the beginning of this, you might find yourself in a place where you're wondering, well, what can I do? How could I help? How could I help my family during this time? How could I encourage my friends, maybe my classmates, or just other people that you might know? And this is where I think it is so valuable in the example that Hannah gives us here in the Bible, in the book of Samuel. Because the first thing that we see her doing in verse number 1 of chapter 2, the first line there says that Hannah prayed. So the very first thing that we can do is to make sure that we are in regular prayer in our own lives with the Lord. It may not seem like something so significant, but it makes a tremendous difference, because the time that you take to be with the Lord, you're going to receive from him in such a way. He's going to impress things upon your heart. He's going to show you things from the Bible. And he's going to give you direction for the day. Jesus actually modeled that for us as well. If you have a moment, you could take a look at the book of Mark, the Gospel of Mark, in chapter number 1, and just read like verses 32 to 35, kind of in that range, where what you see is Jesus purposely getting time alone with God the Father, and praying. And from his prayer is where he receives really his direction for the day on what God the Father would have Jesus do. And, if that was important enough that Jesus took purposeful time to pray, then we really should be doing the same thing. So it's good because it gives you a closeness with God that you're not going to have any other way unless you are spending time in prayer with him. So the other thing that we see here also towards the end of verse number 1, it says here that Hannah is saying, my mouth boasts over my enemies, for I delight in your deliverance. Now, she's not saying boasts in such a way like to be arrogant, like to be mean towards people that were her enemies. But what she's saying here is she has a different perspective from the rest of the world. And that is because of the relationship she has with God. It's the same with us. If we have a good relationship with God, we have a very different perspective on the difficulties of everything that we're doing. Because in the midst of how hard everything was, it says, I delight in your deliverance. And what she's saying is she has great joy in her salvation in God. And even in the midst of everything that's difficult, she was able to maintain her joy, which I think is very important for us too. It's not going to mean that we don't become sad in our circumstances, or like if we see our parents really struggling and having a hard time. It's not that we don't become sad, but it does mean, you know what, I still trust in God, and he's going to help our family, and that's something you can share with your parents as well. So number 1, Hannah prayed, and then number 2, she maintained her joy. Okay, so both things very important. And then a third thing that we can learn from Hannah's example here is found in verse number 2. It says, there is no one holy like the Lord. There is no one besides you. There is no rock like our God. So what is she doing here? She's worshiping. And a lot of times we might think of worship as something exclusively that we do, like when we sing praise music and things like that. But this is really just having a heart, just like she had, because remember, I was telling you how important prayer is. She receives the perspective of joy in her salvation, and then a realization of who God is. There's no one holy like you, God, is what she's saying. There's no one besides you. There's no one else I can turn to in the midst of everything going on. There is no rock like our God. And she's really expressing a heart of worship, that God is her foundation. And though things are very hard, she is not going to be shaken. And so it's just important, something to really keep in mind. God is the rock for your life when things are going very hard. So number 1, again, Hannah prayed. Number 2, she maintained her joy. Number 3, she worshiped. And then lastly, number 4, she trusted God. She trusted God and let him guide her life. Again, in this actually comes from verse number 3, where it says, "Do not keep talking so proudly or let your mouth speak such arrogance. For the Lord is a God who knows, and by him deeds are weighed." So as you're spending time in prayer, as you have a heart full of joy, as you worship him, God is going to give you guidance for your life. He's going to guide and direct your steps, and it's going to cause you to have to trust him more. So it says here, even as she said, our God, the Lord is a God who knows. He knows the things that are going on, even things that you may not necessarily think that, maybe God doesn't know this part of my life or that kind of a thing. It's like God knows all things. And so we don't really have any secrets that we have from God. So we can trust him because he knows all things. The Lord is a God who knows. He knows the situation we're living in. He knows it's very hard for many people. But he also demonstrates his faithfulness in the midst of everything. And so with that, our trust in God will increase if we allow for our relationship to stay close. Our relationship with him, or our trust in him, will continue to increase. And as we trust him, then he will guide our lives, and we will trust the steps that he's leading us on, knowing that the plans he has for us are good. And so in those things, I think those are great examples that we can take from the life of Hannah to help in the times that we live in now. And so again, you may have asked yourself, well, what can I do? Do these things, these very simple steps. Make sure you're in prayer. Make sure you maintain your joy. Make sure you worship God actively and trust God. Let him guide and direct your steps. All right, God bless you guys. And I look forward to the time we're able to come together again and to see one another. But until then, let's keep trusting God, okay? God bless you. Take care. Bye-bye.